The parking lot was nearly empty, the kind of place where shadows stretched long and silence held a certain menace. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a sickly glow over the cracked pavement. Tasha Williams stepped out of her black sedan, adjusting the strap of her gym bag over her shoulder. Midnight workouts had become a habit. No distractions, no one watching, just her and the iron. But something felt off tonight, a tension in the air, a shift in the usual quiet. She heard the footsteps before she saw them, slow, deliberate, a group of men lingering near the entrance, their figures outlined against the dim light. "Well, well," one of them drawled, his voice thick with amusement. "Look what we got here." Tasha didn't turn. She locked her car with a beep and started walking toward the gym doors. Another voice, closer now. "Hey, sweetheart, we're talking to you." A third one whistled. "Ain't she a pretty one? Bet she got a little attitude, too." Tasha exhaled slowly. She had dealt with men like this before, cowards who found courage in numbers. They always wanted the same thing, fear. They fed off it, thrived on it. She stopped and turned. Four of them, mid-20s, cocky smirks plastered across their faces, all white. The leader, a tall one with a buzz cut and a Confederate flag tattoo peeking out from his sleeve, tilted his head, sizing her up. "You lost, sweetheart?" he asked, stepping closer. Tasha didn't flinch, didn't blink. His smirk wavered. A shorter guy with a scar along his cheek scoffed. "What, you deaf or something?" Tasha's voice was calm, steady. "No, I heard you." Silence. The leader's eyes narrowed. Then, without warning, he lunged. Tasha sidestepped effortlessly, but before she could react further, another man grabbed her arm, yanking her backward. "Not so fast, sweetheart." His breath was sour with beer. Tasha's muscles coiled, instincts screaming at her to strike, but she held back. Not yet. A third one shoved her against the hood of her car. "Where you going, huh?" Buzzcut sneered. "Think you too good to talk to us?" Tasha remained still, her expression unreadable. No panic, no fear, just a cold, piercing stare that made them uneasy. For the first time, a flicker of hesitation crossed Buzzcut's face. Scarcheek laughed, shoving her shoulder. "Ain't even fighting back. Must be scared stiff." Tasha tilted her head, studying them, measuring their weaknesses. They had no idea. They had no idea who she was, what she was capable of. The tall one with the tattoo leaned in close, his breath warm against her ear. "Ain't nobody here to help you, sweetheart." Tasha's lip curled just slightly. Then she spoke, voice low, steady. "You're making a mistake." Buzzcut barked out a laugh. "Oh yeah, that's so?" Tasha's gaze was unwavering. "Last chance, walk away." They laughed harder this time. "Walk away? You crazy girl?" Scarcheek grinned. "We just getting started." Tasha inhaled slowly. Let it settle in her bones. Then she smiled. It was the last thing they expected. Buzzcut's smirk faltered. He opened his mouth to speak, and that's when she moved. Fast, too fast for them to react. Her elbow shot back, cracking into the ribs of the man gripping her. He let out a wheeze, stumbling away. Before the others could process what happened, she spun, driving her fist into Scarcheek's jaw with a sickening crunch. The leader cursed, reaching for something in his pocket, but Tasha was faster. She grabbed his wrist, twisting hard. A snap, a scream. The knife clattered to the ground. The fourth man lunged from the side. Tasha ducked, swept his legs from under him, and sent him crashing to the pavement. It had taken her 3 seconds to drop them all. 3. Buzzcut groaned, cradling his broken wrist. "What the hell?" Tasha loomed over him, her expression still calm, still unreadable. She crouched down, voice barely above a whisper. "I told you to walk away." His eyes darted around, panic setting in. His tough guy act was gone. Scarcheek groaned on the ground, his jaw hanging at an odd angle. The other two were crawling away, trying to process what had just happened. Tasha straightened, adjusting her jacket like nothing had happened. And then she turned, walked away. But as she reached her car door, a cold realization settled in. It wasn't over. Because behind her, the sound of engines revving filled the air. She glanced over her shoulder. More headlights, more men. Buzzcut had backup. And this time they weren't coming empty-handed. Tasha Williams sat in the dimly lit diner, stirring a spoon absent-mindedly through her black coffee. The smell of grease and burnt toast lingered in the air, mixing with the low hum of the radio playing an old blues tune. She had been up since dawn. Her body still ran on military time, even though those days were behind her. Civilians liked to talk about moving on, about finding peace after war, but peace was a luxury not everyone got to have. Especially not in a town like this. Granton, Georgia, population 14,000, a place where time had frozen in the worst possible way. The kind of town where the past never really left. It just hid in the cracks of sidewalks and in the wary eyes of black folks who knew better than to walk certain streets after dark. Tasha had grown up here. She had fought to escape it, and somehow she had ended up right back where she started. Refill? She looked up. A waitress, maybe in her late 40s, stood by the table, coffee pot in hand. Her name tag read Martha. Tasha nodded. Yeah, thanks. Martha poured the coffee, but her eyes darted to the bruise forming along Tasha's jaw. Rough night? She asked cautiously. Tasha didn't answer right away. She just exhaled slowly, rolling the mug between her hands. Martha glanced around the diner. It wasn't busy, just a couple of truckers at the counter and an old man reading a newspaper near the window. She lowered her voice. Heard about some trouble near the gym last night. Tasha took a sip of coffee. That right? Martha hesitated. Then she sighed. You need to be careful, honey. Tasha finally met her gaze. Martha wasn't warning her out of concern for the men who had jumped her. She was warning her because she knew exactly who those men were. They didn't walk away happy, Tasha murmured. Martha pressed her lips together. She wiped a non-existent stain off the table with a napkin. You don't understand, she whispered. Derek Slater don't let things go. Tasha's grip on the mug tightened. She knew that name all too well. Derek Slater, son of Sheriff Bill Slater, leader of the Granton Brotherhood. That wasn't just some fancy name. It was a gang, a pack of white supremacists who ran this town in the shadows, hiding behind their good old boy charm and their father's badges. Derek wasn't just another racist thug. He was protected. The system worked for him, not against him. Tasha set the coffee down. If Derek Slater wants a problem, she said evenly, he just found one. Martha inhaled sharply, glancing toward the door as if expecting someone to walk in any second. Honey, you ain't in the military no more. You ain't got backup here. Tasha's jaw clenched. She had never had backup. Not when she was 6 years old, the only black girl in her class, being called slurs by kids who learned hate from their fathers. Not when she was 16, beaten bloody for daring to stand up for herself. Not even when she was 18, when she enlisted in the Navy to escape this place, only to find that the world outside wasn't much kinder. She had learned one thing, though. Fear didn't get you anywhere. Thanks for the coffee, Tasha said, tossing a few bills on the table. She slid out of the booth and grabbed her jacket. Martha's voice stopped her before she reached the door. Tasha. She turned. Martha's face was lined with worry. They don't play fair. Tasha smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Neither do I. The air outside was thick with humidity. The kind that clung to your skin and made you feel like you were walking through molasses. Tasha pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders and started toward her car. Then she saw them. 2 black and white cruisers parked across the street. A figure leaned against one of them, arms crossed, watching her. Derek Slater. Tall, lean, dirty blonde hair shaved close on the sides, just long enough on top to slick back. A smirk permanently etched onto his face. He was wearing a leather jacket, despite the heat. The kind of man who thought he was untouchable. Tasha met his gaze, unwavering. Derek pushed off the cruiser, taking his time crossing the street. He walked like he owned the town, because in a way he did. "Morning, sweetheart," he drawled. "Hell of a night you had." Tasha said nothing. Derek tilted his head, taking in the faint bruising on her jaw. "Looks like my boys got a little carried away." His smirk widened. "They're real eager, you know. Sometimes they don't know when to stop." Tasha's fingers flexed at her sides. Derek stepped closer, lowering his voice. "But see, here's the thing. They were just educating you, reminding you of your place." Tasha's pulse was steady, controlled, but her blood burned. Derek smiled wider. "And what do? You put them in the goddamn dirt." She didn't answer. Derek leaned in. "That's a mistake." Tasha finally spoke. "So was sending them after me." For the briefest second, Derek's smirk flickered, but it was back just as fast. "Cute," he murmured. He took a step back, running a hand through his hair. Then he nodded toward the cruisers. "My old man wants to see you." Tasha's shoulders tensed. She knew it wasn't a request. Derek grinned. "Come on, Williams. Sheriff Slater's real eager to have a little chat." Behind him, the other cops shifted slightly. Watching, waiting. Tasha exhaled slowly. Then she smiled. "Lead the way." Tasha knew something was off the moment she stepped into the sheriff's office. The room smelled like stale coffee and cigarette smoke. Old wooden walls, a dusty ceiling fan spinning lazily overhead. Sheriff Bill Slater sat behind a large oak desk, fingers interlocked, watching her like a man who already knew the ending to the story. Derek leaned against the wall, arms crossed, a satisfied smirk curling his lips. Tasha didn't sit. Sheriff Slater exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple like she was a headache he didn't have time for. "Miss Williams," he said, his voice slow and measured, "you've been making quite the mess." Tasha stayed silent. Slater gestured vaguely with one hand. 3 boys in the hospital, broken ribs, dislocated shoulders. One with a busted nose so bad the doctors say he won't breathe right for months. Tasha's eyes flicked toward Derek. He was still smiling, but his jaw was tight. "Self-defense," she said evenly. Sheriff Slater chuckled. "That's so?" He leaned forward. "Funny, 'cause I got a different story. See my son and his friends? They say you attacked them, unprovoked." Tasha's pulse stayed steady. She had heard this before. The same script, different actors. Slater sighed dramatically. "Now, I don't want to make things hard for you, but the town folks, they ain't happy. You understand?" Tasha said nothing. Slater's voice dropped. "You could just leave." A cold silence stretched between them. Tasha's lips curled into a smirk. "Not happening." Slater's expression didn't change. "Figured you'd say that." That's when she heard it. The faint shuffle of boots behind her. Too late. Something slammed into the back of her head. Blinding pain, stars exploding behind her eyes. She went down hard. The last thing she saw before the world went black was Derek Slater's satisfied grin. Tasha's eyes fluttered open. Darkness. Her arms ached. Her wrists were raw. It took her a second to register the tight pressure around them. Rope. Her ankles too. She was tied to a chair. Concrete floors. The sharp scent of rust and motor oil. A warehouse. Then, voices. "You hit her too hard, dumbass." "She's awake now, ain't she?" Tasha lifted her head slowly. 3 figures stood a few feet away, bathed in the dim light of a flickering overhead bulb. Derek Slater, Utuwe, and 2 of his goons. One was Mickey Ross, a barrel-chested man with a bulldog face and a Confederate flag tattoo on his forearm. The other, Evan Carter, lanky with a nervous twitch. Derek stepped forward, crouching to meet her eye level. "Rise and shine, soldier." Tasha's mouth was dry. She worked her jaw, testing for damage. No broken bones, just bruises. She smirked. "Took 3 of you?" Mickey scowled. "Had to make sure you stayed down." Derek chuckled. "And here I thought the Navy trained you better." Tasha didn't respond. She was scanning the room, observing, calculating. There was an old metal shelf stacked with paint cans to her right, a rusty chain hanging from the ceiling to her left. More importantly, a knife. It was tucked into Mickey's belt, close but not close enough. Derek stood, stretching lazily. See, Tasha, you keep making mistakes. You don't belong here. And instead of taking the sheriff's offer, you had to go and act tough. He sighed dramatically. Now, we got to teach you a lesson. Mickey cracked his knuckles. Should have stayed in your place. Tasha smiled. Derek frowned. What's funny? She tilted her head. You ever hear the saying, never corner a soldier? Derek's expression darkened. What? That's when she moved. With lightning speed, Tasha yanked her wrists apart. Her fingers had been working the ropes the whole time. They snapped free. Mickey lunged first. Big mistake. Tasha thrust her head forward. Crack! Her forehead smashed straight into his nose. A sickening crunch. Mickey staggered back, blood spurting. He howled, clutching his face. Evan reached for something. A gun? A knife? Didn't matter. Tasha kicked the chair backward, flipping it into his legs. He went down hard. Derek? Derek was frozen. Tasha moved fast. She dove for Mickey, yanked the knife from his belt. Bitch! Slash. She cut the rope at her ankles. Now she was free. Mickey was still dazed. Evan was groaning on the floor. That just left Derek. He took a slow step back, reaching for his waistband. A gun. Tasha launched herself at him. She grabbed his wrist, twisted. He yelped in pain, dropping the gun. She caught it before it hit the ground. Spun it, cocked it, aimed it straight at his head. Silence. Derek's chest heaved. His cocky smirk? Gone. Evan was still wheezing on the ground. Mickey? Too busy trying to keep his nose from gushing all over his shirt. Tasha pressed the gun against Derek's forehead. You were saying? She murmured. He swallowed hard. Tasha's finger hovered over the trigger. She could end it. Right here. Right now. But no. That would be too easy. Instead, she leaned in, lowering her voice to a whisper. You should have killed me when you had the chance. Then, she pistol-whipped him. Crack. Derek dropped like a sack of bricks. Tasha exhaled, chest rising and falling. She turned toward the warehouse door. Time to go. But this wasn't over. Not even close. The night air was cold, heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. Tasha's breath came in sharp, measured exhales as she pressed her body against the rough bark of a tree. Somewhere behind her, dogs barking, voices shouting, flashlights cutting through the dark. They were hunting her. Mickey was still out cold. Evan groaned, clutching his ribs. Derek lay motionless, blood dripping from his forehead. Tasha wasted no time. She moved fast, rummaging through Derek's pockets. A wallet, a lighter. Keys. Her fingers closed around them. Jackpot. She turned toward the warehouse door. Freedom. Then, a voice. Don't move. Tasha stilled. A gun cocked. Slowly, she turned her head. Sheriff Slater. Standing in the doorway. Gun raised. He stepped inside, his face unreadable. The flickering warehouse bulb cast long shadows across his weathered features. You should have run when you had the chance, girl, he murmured. Tasha's grip tightened around the keys. Slater noticed, smirked. That won't help you. Behind him, more footsteps. 2 more officers entered. Deputy Tompkins, Deputy Reed. Both white. Both smirking like this was just another good old Friday night in their racist little town. Sheriff Slater sighed. Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to put your hands behind your head. Real slow. Tasha didn't move. Slater tilted his head. Or I could put a bullet in you. Wouldn't be the first time a dangerous suspect got shot resisting arrest. Whew, Tompkins chuckled. Yep, bet she'll make the news. Tasha calculated her options. 3 men, 1 gun drawn, close quarters. She needed an opening, a weakness. That's when she noticed it. Reed's belt, His holster was loose, sloppy, careless. Tasha kept her expression blank, raised her hands. Slater nodded to Reed. Cuff her. Reed stepped forward, pulling out a pair of zip ties. Tasha counted the steps. 1, 2, 3. The moment he reached for her wrists, she moved. She slammed her forehead into his nose. Crack! Reed screamed, stumbling back. Slater cursed, raising his gun, but Tasha was already in motion. She grabbed Reed's loose holster, yanked out his pistol, spun, aimed, boom. A single shot shattered the light bulb overhead. Darkness. Slater fired blindly. Tasha hit the ground, rolling. She sprang to her feet, sprinting toward the warehouse exit. Behind her, chaos. Slater shouting. Tompkins tripping over Reed. The stench of gunpowder in the air. She hit the door, shoving it open. Cold air, night sky, freedom. But not yet. She had to disappear. Tasha moved fast and silent. Her boots crushed damp leaves as she weaved through the dense trees, her breathing steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. Behind her, the sounds of pursuit. Dogs barking, flashlights flickering through the trees. Sheriff Slater's voice. Find her! She needed cover, a hiding spot. Tasha's mind worked fast. Think, think. Then, a flash of memory. A river. She had seen it before, driving through town, just outside the woods. If she could reach it, suddenly, a flashlight beam swept over her. There! Gunfire erupted. Bullets tore through branches, inches from her head. Tasha dove behind a fallen log, pressing herself into the mud. Footsteps pounded closer. She clenched her teeth. No way out. Then, a hand grabbed her. She whirled, but the grip was strong, familiar. A whisper in her ear, don't move. Tasha stiffened. The voice, low, gravelly. Earl Jennings. Tasha had met him once. Vietnam vet, tough as nails, didn't talk much. Now he was here, saving her life. Earl pressed a finger to his lips. Stay quiet. Then, he moved. Fast. Silent. He led her deeper into the trees, sticking to the shadows, avoiding the searchlights. Finally, a small, hidden shack. They slipped inside. Tasha pressed her back against the wall, catching her breath. Earl peered out the window. They'll be here soon. Tasha nodded. I need to get out of town. Earl's expression was unreadable. Then finally he spoke. Got a plan? Tasha smirked, blood on her lip, dirt on her face. Tasha's stomach dropped. She and Earl were barely catching their breath when the sound of screeching tires tore through the woods. Sheriff's cruisers, multiple. Headlights cut through the trees like piercing white daggers. Earl cursed under his breath. They found us. Tasha's mind raced. Did someone talk? Did they track us? Then, loudspeakers blared. Come out with your hands up. Earl tensed. We run. They'll shoot. Tasha gritted her teeth. She had no choice. She raised her hands, stepped forward. The moment she came into the light, 3 officers rushed her. Knees in her back, hands yanked behind her. Cold steel cuffs biting her wrists. She didn't even resist. Deputy Tompkins sneered. Not so tough now, huh? Earl stepped forward, hands raised. She didn't do anything. Sheriff Slater emerged. Face calm, too calm. He looked right at Tasha. Then, he smirked. She's under arrest for assaulting Derek Slater and his friends. Tasha's blood ran cold. The sheriff was Derek's uncle. The air stank of sweat, piss, and cold metal. Tasha sat on the hard cot, hands resting on her knees. The cold steel bars in front of her felt like a joke. This wasn't justice. This was a setup. Outside the cell, Sheriff Slater strolled in. Smug, slow. He leaned against the bars, arms crossed. You should have stayed down. Tasha didn't blink. Slater sighed, shaking his head. You Navy types always think you're invincible. But this, he gestured around the cell, this is real power. Tasha clenched her jaw. Say nothing. Don't give him satisfaction. Slater smirked. Here's how this works. Derek and his boys, they were just having a little fun. But you, he clicked his tongue, you put 3 good young men in the hospital. He leaned in, voice dropping. Now either you plead guilty or you never walk out of here. Tasha's fist clenched. Slater grinned. Welcome to our town. Then he turned and walked out. A chuckle echoed from the shadows. Tasha turned. A woman sat on the other cot, black, late 30s, dark eyes filled with quiet rage. She studied Tasha. Well, well, looks like they finally bagged themselves a real fighter. Tasha exhaled. Who are you? The woman smirked. Call me Laverne. Tasha frowned. Why are you here? Laverne leaned back. Same reason as you. Tasha's gut twisted. This wasn't new. She narrowed her eyes. How many others? Laverne's smile faded. Too many. Tasha's fists clenched. And the sheriff? Laverne's voice dropped. He's been covering for Derek's gang for years. Tasha's stomach churned. She knew it. Laverne continued. You're not the first, but you might be the first to survive. A heavy silence. Then, Laverne leaned forward, voice low. They've killed before. Tasha's breath hitched. Laverne's eyes darkened. A boy, 19, Jerome Carter. The name hit Tasha like a punch. She had seen it, on a missing persons flyer. Laverne's voice trembled. Derek and his crew lynched him. The sheriff made sure the case disappeared. Tasha felt a slow, burning rage rise in her chest. The sheriff wasn't just corrupt. He was a murderer. And he just made the biggest mistake of his life. He put her in a cage. And now, she was going to burn his whole world down. Tasha sat on the cold cot, staring at the cracked ceiling. Her mind wasn't on the bars. It was on the lock. A simple, old-fashioned mechanism. One that could be picked if she had the right tool. She glanced at Laverne. How tight do they pat you down when they book you? Laverne smirked. Not tight enough. From her sleeve, she slid out a thin metal hairpin. Tasha took it, hands steady, heart slow. Focus. She leaned against the bars, inserting the pin into the keyhole. Click, click, snap. The lock popped open. She exhaled. Stay here. Keep quiet. Laverne chuckled. Not a damn chance. I want in. Tasha studied her, then nodded. Fine. 2 ghosts in the night. They moved. The hallway was empty. 1 guard at the front. Tasha crept behind him like a shadow. 1 quick motion, arm around his throat. A swift chokehold. 10 seconds, out cold. She grabbed his keys, his gun, and his radio. Laverne grabbed his baton. They were free, but they weren't running. They had unfinished business. Tasha knew where Derek and his gang hid, an old auto shop on the edge of town. They thought they were safe. They thought she was done, but she was just getting started. The night was thick with humidity as Tasha and Laverne approached. Inside, laughter, voices, a party. They had no idea what was coming. Tasha crouched by a window. 5 men inside. Derek. His right-hand man, Wade. 3 others. Tasha exhaled, silent, focused. Then she moved. A brick through the window. Shattered glass. Men jumped up, startled. What the hell? Tasha burst through the back door. Fast, ruthless, precise. First man gun raised. Tasha disarmed him, flipped him over the table. Crack. Second man swung a bat. She ducked, elbowed his ribs, splintered bone. Third man ran for the door. Laverne took him down, baton to the skull. Only 2 left. Wade and Derek. Wade grabbed a shotgun. Tasha was faster. A sharp kick to his knee. Snap. He collapsed, screaming. Only Derek stood, face pale, eyes wide. He took a step back. Tasha advanced. No more running. Derek snarled. You think you're some kind of hero? Tasha tilted her head. No. Then she lunged. Derek swung first. A wild punch. Tasha ducked, elbow to his ribs. He gasped, stumbled back. Then he grabbed a knife, slashed. Tasha dodged, barely. The blade sliced her shoulder. Pain burned, but she didn't stop. She grabbed his wrist, twisted. The knife dropped. Derek punched her gut. Tasha gritted her teeth. He charged. She used his momentum. Flipped him. Crash. Derek slammed onto the concrete. Dazed, groaning, beaten. Tasha stood over him. Laverne grabbed a gun. Let's finish this. Tasha shook her head. No. Derek blinked up at her, confused. Then, what? Tasha leaned down, whispering, You're gonna wish I did. Then, she pulled out the sheriff's radio. She clicked it on and spoke directly into it. Sheriff Slater, I have your nephew, and I have proof. The silence on the other end was ice cold. Then, panic. Don't do anything stupid, Williams. Tasha smirked. Too late. Tasha's fingers moved fast over the keyboard, uploading every file, every video, every piece of evidence she had gathered. Security footage, hidden records, confessions from victims. Send. The files spread like wildfire, across social media, news sites, directly to the FBI. There was no stopping it now. She leaned back, exhaling. It was done. A moment later, sirens. Flashing red and blue filled the night as the sheriff's office exploded into chaos. Sheriff Slater shoved through his office, panicked. What the hell is going on? A deputy ran in, face pale. It's everywhere, sir. The FBI. The door burst open. Federal agents stormed in. Guns raised. Orders shouted. Sheriff Slater froze. Sheriff Slater, an agent growled. You're under arrest. His face twisted with rage. For what? The agent tossed a folder onto his desk. Murder, conspiracy, cover-ups, corruption. Every secret exposed. Sheriff Slater lunged, but two agents slammed him against the desk, cuffing him. Get your hands off me. I'm the law here. The agent smirked. Not anymore. Click. Sheriff Slater, arrested. Derek Slater, dragged out in cuffs. The entire gang, rounded up. News cameras flashed. Tasha watched from a rooftop nearby, unseen. She smiled. The next morning, news channels were on fire. Reporters stood in front of the sheriff's office. Breaking news. A major white supremacist gang has been exposed and dismantled overnight, thanks to leaked evidence. Among those arrested, Sheriff Slater, his nephew Derek, and multiple officers involved in a cover-up of violent hate crimes. Another screen. FBI officials giving a statement. We received anonymous, irrefutable evidence leading to this massive takedown. Whoever this whistleblower is, they may have saved countless lives. But there was one mystery. The headline read, Unknown woman takes down racist gang. Who is she? Survivors, witnesses. Nobody could confirm who did it. All they knew? A black woman had fought back. And won. A small bar. Quiet. Tasha sat in the corner, hood up, sipping a drink. She glanced up at the TV. The news was still running. Her story, her fight. She smirked. Then, she stood, dropping a few bills on the table. As she walked out, a voiceover from the news echoed behind her. The mystery woman has vanished, but one thing is clear, she changed everything. Tasha stepped into the night and disappeared,